Hello, welcome to United We Stand Sessions. I'm Christina Tobin with Free and Equal Elections, and thank you for joining us on our weekly session. We have total variety of artists and individuals, and today we have Gloria La Riva, whom I actually just saw this past March at a presidential debate. She was one of our candidates. She's the presidential candidate for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Welcome, Gloria, to United We Stand Sessions.
Thank you for the invitation, Christina. And I also saw you 4 years ago at the last debate, too.
Oh, yeah, you definitely stood out. I want to first of all thank you for being a part of our debate this March. I think it was March 8th, before the primary at Chicago Hilton. You were one of 18 candidates and a few of the women on the panel. It was so nice to have you be a part of that. Thank you for flying yourself in. All the candidates flew themselves in, hosted themselves, and that was their way of giving and supporting the debate. Thank you for being a part of that event. It meant a lot.
Well, you remember that I mentioned, and others did too, the coming COVID-19 virus. And it was already present in the US, but that was the very beginning. And we couldn't imagine how bad it would be, how disastrous it would be today.
You were the candidate of all 18 that really did bring it up and dive into it. We did that debate probably days, not even a week before the shutdown, lockdown, whatnot came about. And also, as you mentioned, it was really an honor having you in our 2016 presidential debate at CU Boulder. So it really stood out for me to have like a familiarity, because you were just to see that consistency of you being one of, I think we had 4 candidates at that debate at CU Boulder in 16. So that was beautiful to have you there in the primary. And Gloria, for anybody that's not familiar with you, I've actually been this morning for an hour or two watching a few interviews and videos of your background and taking notes to really get to know you better. Wow, you have a message. And for those who are not familiar with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, could you let them know what the viewpoints are of that party and why you're the presidential candidate for the Party for Socialism and Liberation, that is?
Yeah, well, about my history, sometimes, I've been petitioning with our many of our volunteers and members in different states. And I like to go because it's good to hear what people are saying when you ask them to sign to get a socialist on the ballot. It's far easier than it was years ago. Nevertheless, sometimes people say, well, what is your experience? What offices have you held? I've held no political public office. I was elected as a union president. But I think my experience is more important because I'm a worker. I know what it's like to organize or try to organize a union drive and get fired for it, and what it was to be in a union most of my working life, and the benefits that came from that, and why it is that, for example, I supported in 2008 the Employee Free Choice Act, which would have radicalized the working class situation. It would have enabled millions of workers to join unions and improve their wages, conditions at work, and for their families. I have been an anti-war activist where I have visited war zones and zones of occupation and U.S. blockade and seen the devastation to millions of people and why it is we need to shut down the Pentagon and bring home all the troops, stop occupying dozens of countries that the United States does. So the experience that I have is that of the vast majority of people in the US and the needs that we have as a people, those who create the wealth of society, and yet those who are at the very bottom in terms of benefiting. You see a company like Walmart, that most people have known as one of the richest corporations, that affect people's lives, and how little the workers make versus what the family, the Waltons, it's been estimated before the pandemic that they own as much as 62 million American families. And that wealth comes from the low wages that they pay people at home and abroad. Or you look at Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Whole Foods, those companies owned by less than a handful of almost trillionaires who barely pay taxes. There was no taxes for Amazon last year, and yet they have raked in over $600 billion in revenues just in these 4 months of pandemic because of the pandemic. And yet their workers are suffering. They don't have a right to a union, for example, to protect themselves, to be able to bargain with the company collectively. So this is what we're facing. The crisis of capitalism has become more stark in this pandemic.
I couldn't agree with you more. What stood out, aside from the blatant, obvious, Amazon and PayPal and so on, that they should be, I don't see any issues with them paying their fair share of taxes. I mean, as the lower class and middle class are paying, it makes sense for them to pay at the very least. You mentioned about different countries that you visited. I definitely have heard you speak quite a bit about Venezuela. I'm not sure if that's a country that you visited. What countries have you been to? Can you tell me a little bit more about
Well,
your experiences and your feeling on what's going on there?
the ones I've most visited are Cuba,
Cuba.
dozens of times,
Hmm.
Venezuela, probably a little less than 20 times. All of them after Hugo Chavez was elected president, when he became president in 1999. And Mexico, where my mother's from, my relatives are from. I've been there since I was a child many times,
Mm.
and a lot of other countries. The other one, Iraq. I was there 3 times during the 12 years of U.S. blockade, a virtual total blockade where medicine, all the needs for civilian infrastructure to be rebuilt after the U.S. 1991 bombing war were completely blocked, and therefore it led to 12 years of sanctions that killed over 1.5 million people. Most of the years of those sanctions being under Bill Clinton,
Mm.
who emphatically said he would not lift the sanctions. That was followed by another bombing war in 2003 that led to the current occupation. And a country that used to be highly organized, very developed, from the nationalization and control of its own resources, mainly being oil, that people were able to benefit. But this is something that's very dangerous for the US government. Any country that has taken control of its resources, uh, the destiny in the people's hands, has been bombed, blockaded, occupied, whether it's Cuba, Venezuela. And now there's news of an unveiled plan from US State Department cables, like the famous WikiLeaks, of a US plan to try to overthrow the democratically elected government in Nicaragua, because they are also enjoying uh, popular support from the fact that the resources of the country are in the people's control. And that is actually the question of the overthrow of Honduras and the beginning unraveling of the progressive leftist governments of Latin America actually began under President Obama in 2009 with the overthrow of the Honduran government. So there's many things that are affecting tens of millions of lives abroad, but also in the United States. Because I always say, as long as there's wars and occupation abroad, there can't be jobs, full employment, healthcare at home.
All right. Lot to take in there. I definitely am going to rewatch this interview and definitely dig a bit more in the research and the direction you're going in. So thank you, Gloria. I look forward to learning more even from you off this interview. But I wanted to, talk into from the Chicago debate. Thanks again for being a part of this march. You did discuss during that debate or brought it up, the coronavirus issue, which now has evolved into a pandemic. Um, I'd love for you really to discuss more about your feelings about the coronavirus pandemic in detail.
I'd say that almost entirely the deaths that were caused, the more than 155,000 now, as of today, are in the United States, are directly due to Trump's criminal activity. The denial that it was a crisis, even last night he said it's going to disappear, and why children have to go back to school, and teachers, students, and paralegals, other workers in the schools have to be exposed to the virus without any national plan for protection. We're seeing what was entirely preventable. In the very beginning of the pandemic, even Trump had mentioned the Defense Production Act, something nobody was aware of. It was a law that was passed during the Korean War, and it was a law that was intended to allow the U.S. to take control of large industries in order to produce weapons of war, to carry out what eventually was a 3-year bombing war of Korea that killed 4 million Koreans by the U.S. But that act enables any president to use executive power to order the production of any goods that are needed for defense. Certainly, fighting the coronavirus is an act of defense, a defense of the people's lives. There could have been literally billions of masks created, of the ventilators that would be needed, of building even hospitals. You know, China in the beginning, in Wuhan province, had built 3 hospitals within days, within 2 weeks, entire hospitals to handle the crisis. In the meantime, here in the US, for the first months, people were told, unless you can't breathe anymore, unless you're virtually critical, stay home. But earlier intervention shows they could have survived. Many people could have lived. And then there's still no mass testing. Not even in hospitals can people get mass testing with instant results. Now, in the White House, Trump can get tested every time he needs, several times a day, with results in 15 minutes. That should be available to everybody. But the Defense Production Act is not being implemented the way it should. What powers did Trump use instead? When the meat packing plants, whether it's poultry, pork, or beef, were having to shut down after explosion of cases erupted in the factories, Trump issued an executive order to say that it's essential work and they had to remain open. If anyone knows what the animal food production is about, or animal production for people's consumption, it involves, for example, in chicken production, poultry, that workers have to be side by side and killing chickens, you know, dismembering them, eviscerating, just about every 10 seconds. An extreme speed up that's developed over the last 30 years in order for there to be unlimited amounts of not food, but profit for those companies. And that's what Trump did. He ordered the workers to come back without any required protection. And so this is why Trump is responsible for the deaths of so many people. A mass murderer, if you will.
And I see a comment, and I urge anybody listening to the stream, if any questions or comments, feel free to submit those. I see Matt, I think Brallo is his last name. So some people say those hospitals, quote, hospitals, were mass incinerators. Just, I mean, that's what one of the individuals wrote. What's your take on that comment, Gloria?
Well, I think that over the last months, the medical field has learned better practices that develops from experience with this unknown virus, better practices of how to assure a higher rate of survival. Um, for example, they found out if you turn people over on their stomach, it would enable their lungs to breathe better. The idea of giving people oxygen way before they needed a ventilator, which is really critical stage, giving the oxygen so that their oxygen level wouldn't go down to like dangerous levels and affect their organs. There are certain medicines, certainly not the hydroxychloroquine, I can't even pronounce that word.
Hydrochloroquine.
The one that Trump keeps touting falsely. Who knows what kind of stocks he owns or his friends that produce it. Anyway, there have been better practices, but I'll tell you, if there were not a U.S. blockade of Cuba and the U.S. in the middle of the pandemic trying to destroy Cuba and Venezuela as well by the sanctions blockade, they would have found that Cuba has produced two types of medicine that have, together with combined treatment, have resulted in the survival rate of 80% of people who reach critical stage, while in the US, 80% of people who reach critical die. The Cubans have a very, very good medical treatment because it's not based on profits. And everyone has universal health care. Everybody was tested early who needed it, and people were given early intervention. Early intervention is the key. In addition to the social and economic aspect, if people have been given early on a continued monthly income that should be granted even today, instead of that measly $1,200 that took over a month for people to get, and most people still haven't gotten it, instead of that minor 1.1 time deal while the banks got trillions, people could have stayed home. Instead, people were, by the end of 2 months, people who were being promoted by Trump to open up the economy started going out without masks, listening to his false instruction, listening to his lies, and exposing themselves and the public to more danger. In other words, what we needed and still need today is a shutdown of the society, a lockdown, for as long as it takes, for not for the plane to go down, but a flattening of the curve. I wrote an article, for example, about Cuba that 87 people have died. And in 13 of the 15 provinces, they've already entered phase 3, an opening of the economy, because due to the lockdown that they had and the respect that everyone had for the masks, staying home, food was delivered to them, or they understood they had to stay home. Even all the public transportation was banned so that people wouldn't expose each other. And so you have in a country of 11 million people, only 87 who've died, and almost everybody has recovered. This is a country that's blockaded by the US, where medicine is being blocked from coming in, where food is being thwarted. And just think what could happen if the world cooperated, if the US cooperated, instead of leaving the World Health Organization. It's really, so it's a crime what Trump is carrying out. However, you can't let the Democrats off the hook, because their failure over the years, including under Obama, when he had the 2 years of majority of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, they could have passed sweeping legislation for health care protection, for immigrant rights, for legalization process for immigrants, who right now, we should thank them for being the heroic workers that they are in those meatpacking plants, working in the fields in 100-degree plus temperatures in California and elsewhere, mostly immigrants, without any rights, being undocumented, picking the food, harvesting the food, packing the food, freezing the food, and providing what everybody needs, food. And yet, I know farm workers in the Central Valley, including a woman who's just played a heroic role in the town of McFarland, who is undocumented. And those workers are still only making $13 an hour while they're providing the food, working 12 hours a day and more. They should be given immediate rights to legalization, in addition to the other undocumented, who today legally are being denied financial help in this crisis. I mean, what cruelty of this government. And therefore, I blame the Democrats as well.
Yeah, it's
today,
interesting.
Biden, excuse me, Christina.
Oh, go ahead.
Today, Biden still insists that we don't need a national health care plan. This is what we need more than anything, is national free health care. So poor people, working class people, don't stay home getting sicker and sicker, afraid of a bill that they'll incur or afraid that they'll be turned away. It's to me just unimaginable what people have to go through to try to balance their financial needs, their need for food, the need to feed their kids, the need to take care of their family, versus going to the hospital to get care or a doctor.
It seems under a sustainable system, as I'm learning more about blockchain voting, experts saying we'll transform our voting system and bring about political transparency when we shift the power from the federal to state, really local level, under a sustainable system where we can see how our tax dollars are being spent, and also, Amazon maybe throwing in a few dollars or more in taxes and so on, equality, right? That it just doesn't need to be a divisive issue. Let the people decide if they want health care for their community. And I think that most will agree that they would want that. So I do see that in the future. I don't think it needs to be a divisive. I think deep down, we all want people, most of us want people to be healthy and happy and love and compassion. And when you bring up Obama and his lack of Democrats and so on towards helping the people, all the issues you spoke of, it was clear to me in 08, serving or as a duty, working as a national ballot access coordinator for Ralph Nader, him and his team, they knew that Obama had let down the security measures. A bold thing to say, but Nader said this, that the website on Obama, the security measures were let down so he could funnel corporate money into his campaign illegally. But, when you're part of the system and you're one of the main parties that appoint these people, judges into office, sometimes or often you're not held accountable for doing wrong things because, you're a part of the system, the problem. So it did not come as any surprise to me that Obama fell very short of I didn't have any expectations for sure there. On the massive trillion bailout, I have to give credit where it's due. I didn't like that Congress tried to just pass it without anybody voting, right? Nobody on the record, like, we've passed this $1 trillion bailout. And it was Thomas Massey in Kentucky. It was like, hey, like, you guys need to put your names down and go on record passing this, $1 trillion really kind of bankster bailout. And I think these congressional candidates have really set themselves up, or they're setting themselves up. They have set themselves up to make it like a lot more easy to replace them starting in the 2022 races. So good on Thomas Massey for doing that. Even if they voted online, like just some sort of record, they didn't have to be there in person in DC. I mean, we're doing contact tracing now. We have the technology to track everybody. We can, technologically have every congressperson be tracked to vote for like one of the biggest bills historically ever. So those are just some thoughts I had, and I wanted to roll into ballot access. Unless you had a response to what I said, but
no, that's fine. I think ballot access is an important
yeah.
question.
Well, we got a couple. Jim Becklin, thank you for that comment, Jim. Thank you, Christina, Gloria, and the Free and Equal crew for doing this. You're so welcome, Jim. Thank you for that comment. And we're just getting started. This is not a race, it's a journey. And I'm looking forward to having so many more conversations, having you again in the future, Gloria. Maybe your new vice presidential running mate I saw announced with you. Before we go into ballot access, I've got to bring up Leonard Peltier. I know he's not doing well. 44 years. This one breaks my heart.
Well, speaking of the pandemic, the COVID is racing like wildfire through prisons, now including in the federal prison Coleman 1, maximum security prison near Tampa, Florida, where Leonard Peltier, Peltier, is imprisoned 44 and a half years, as you said, for a crime he didn't commit, for a crime that the FBI is insisting that he was guilty of, even though they manipulated the evidence, they falsified evidence, they railroaded him into prison because 2 agents were killed. 2 agents were killed in 1975 because of a raid that they conducted, unidentified, in a time where there was enormous violence, the highest rate of violence in the country, actually, on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. It's a long background, but it had to do with a very corrupt authority there that was engaged in murdering people who were just trying to defend their land and opposed this corrupt government. Leonard Peltier was one of many people who went to defend them, to protect the population there, the Lakota population. FBI comes in, there's a shootout, 2 FBI agents and a native man are killed. Nobody ever bothered to find out what happened to the native man killed in the shootout. And Leonard Peltier is paying the price, even though his 2 co-defendants were found innocent by reason of self-defense in a trial in Iowa before an all-white jury, by the way, in 1975. But Leonard, because he had escaped to Canada, the FBI decided, you're going to pay for the 2 agents dying. And that is why Leonard is still in prison. So last year we asked him to be my vice presidential candidate. He said, I'm honored to. Not only am I a native traditionalist, I am a socialist. And we had a wonderful run, but because his health is really deteriorating, he has diabetes. He's blind in one eye. He had open heart surgery less than 2 years ago. And now he's developing a kidney disease. He could not continue with the campaign and has to also focus on his legal matters. He has a new attorney who's doing a great job. And so we could not continue with him risking his life. He said, Gloria, I committed myself to you and your campaign, so I leave the decision up to you. And there was no way that we were going to say, stay on, Leonard. His health and his freedom are more important, even though our campaign helped to raise his profile much more than it had been, because 44 years is a long time. We're committed to fighting to get him transferred to a new medical facility where he can get the proper care. Where he is now, the doctors have told him, we can't treat you for what you need. But his is a story of many prisoners.
Yes.
His is the story, for example, of San Quentin, where I've been in the protest in California, San Quentin, where more than half the inmates within a few weeks got the virus because of negligence by the authorities. And even Governor Newsom is saying that he'll release some 8,000 by the end of August. The end of August, more people are going to get sick. There's a rebellion right now taking place in Waycross, Georgia, at the Ware State Prison, where the prisoners a few days ago broke out in protest to say, we're being starved. There's no testing. We're not being protected from the virus. In San Juan County, New Mexico, in the northwestern part of the state, which is mostly Navajo or Diné population, the inmates broke out into rebellion there in July, mid-July, because they said, we're not getting food. We're being starved. We're not getting testing. We're not getting safe distancing. This is happening all over the country in the prisons. And that's why I say that the vast majority of inmates don't belong in prison. Even before the virus, excessive sentencing, many innocent, many in because of economic crimes, many who have long served their time and should be out, and those who are right now vulnerable by age or compromised health conditions. But this is a state of America. It's a state of the long-term nursing facilities, the residential homes, where almost half, about a few weeks ago, almost half of the deaths were in those homes. So sad to see seniors who couldn't even see their loved ones because they were isolated, and the workers as well, getting sick and dying, again, due to the negligence of the government. But the thing about prisoners is I'd like to welcome people to watch. Every 2 weeks now, we're having on Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern, we're showing the lives of different political prisoners, from Umi Abu Jamal to Leonard Peltier, Mutulu Shakur, Jakil Muntakim. We're showing video of them, witnesses from their family, talking about their cases, men who've been in 40, 50 years, women as well. Julian Assange, for example, in Europe, who the US is trying to deep six in
Mm.
prison for exposing US war crimes abroad. In other words, most people don't know the plight of prisoners, or they've been demonized so that people have no sympathy for them. But anybody could end up in prison. We have to sympathize with people who, for the most part, are in for economic crimes. And what we need to do is not just create these massive prisons and mass incarceration, but to prevent crime with jobs, real economic opportunity, and other social programs. Working to, for example, overcome the devastating drug crisis, opioids, heroin, meth, all these without a national plan to help heal people with cures or economic backing.
Well, yeah, it's very disturbing that we have the largest prison population in the
In the
world
world.
here. It's
Yep.
disturbing, and that alone speaks for itself that it's become all about money, prison system, and not so much about heart and caring and protecting the people,
Yeah.
which is really what our government was set up for. So not necessarily to govern us, but to protect us. And it's very lacking. A lot of room for improvement would be the kindest way I could say
Well,
about that.
I say that the U.S. was not created on access to freedom for the people when you have that native people were being
Hmm.
uh, crushed, genocide committed, and also that it was a country of slavery, North and South, and that it was set up to make sure that the powers of capital remain in power. And that's what we're suffering today. The Electoral College, the so-called checks and balances. You pass a progressive law, the Supreme Court can order it unconstitutional. The Supreme Court can weaken the Voting Rights Act, something that is just looming today about people being denied the right to vote through gerrymandering or, you know, allowing states in the South to kick people off the rolls.
Hmm.
And
Ballot access.
by the way, I think that prisoners and parolees and undocumented and uh, permanent resident immigrants should be allowed to vote. If you live and work here, why don't you have a say? And youth under 18. I think people from the age of 16 should be able to vote.
Gloria, it seems like the laws and restrictions for immigrants is so strict. I mean, just sometimes it seems like there's a lot of individuals that come here that want to be law abiding, but they make it so difficult, the laws, where it's just not even an option. So it just seems like there could be a lot more balance there, to where what you're saying isn't and doesn't need to be a divisive issue. But, that's how the two-party, really one-party duopoly thrives. That's, I guess, the disease that they thrive off is divisiveness. And that's very clear. When we unite, we'll squash that disease, and we will unite here in the United States of America, and the whole world will follow when they see that happen. And so I see a question here. It's a good one. Nathan John Hetzel, two here from him. How can you replace congressmen, women, when we have ridiculous ballot access? It's a travesty. And he also said, and briefly, we start an idea movement and we replace them all, starting in 22. But the question for you, Gloria, I see more directly is, how do you plan to get on the ballot due to COVID? Iowa has done little to ease ballot access. I think you're on the ballot in 6 states. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe more now.
In the next days, I believe that we have the potential to be on in 12 states. I think
Nice.
potentially 13. I was just nominated on Saturday, August 1, by the California Peace and Freedom Party. That's a big one.
It is huge.
That's
Nader worked really hard for that one in 08. I was on the inside there, and he got
yeah,
it. But
right.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a
Peace and Freedom
big
Party
one.
there. We'll be on in California. We're on in Colorado, New Mexico, New Jersey. We just got certified, and Illinois, uh, Vermont today. Today, we're gonna. I believe we will qualify in Washington State, New Jersey. We did. Tennessee, Louisiana, Arkansas. We just handed our papers in. How did we do it in the pandemic? Well, first of all, Vermont Liberty Union Party already indicated they would nominate us. They're on the ballot in Vermont. And we planned to be on in 15 states, including South Dakota, which would it be the first time that we would try to be on for Leonard Peltier, because that's where the shootout happened. And also, it's a very strong population of Native people, a lot of struggle going on there. We want to highlight those issues, which we still will anyway. And the first state that began petitioning was the first week of March, our people in New Mexico. Imagine this, young people in our party collected 4,553 signatures in 11 days. Volunteer. Nobody paid them. That's a remarkable rate.
For volunteer, yes.
Morning and night. And what were they doing? They were planning to go on to South Dakota to help Leonard Peltier. But then the pandemic hit and we said, we have to stop. And it was sad, From March 15 to June 20, we didn't petition anymore. We couldn't start anywhere. So from June 20, in 5 days, our people collected the necessary more than 6,000 signatures total in New Mexico, and we qualified. We began petitioning in Tennessee, Louisiana, we're getting the electors. Colorado, it required a payment with electors. New Jersey, petitioning, collecting almost 2,000. Illinois' courts cut down the ballot requirement from 25,000 valid signatures to 2,500, only 10%. That's one of the very, very few states that changed the rules. And they ordered the Greens and the Libertarians on the ballot without collecting because they had been on before. That was very liberal. That was very important.
Wow.
But nevertheless, we did collect. How did we do it? We would have tables with lots of hand sanitizer, keep our distance. We'd have the petitions on the table. We'd talk to people because a lot of people were outside. And also because of the Black Lives Matter protests, people were going out into the street. And I dare say that the protesters of the progressive demonstrations have, for the most part, had masks. Not always, but for the most part. And I think that there's been very, very low incidence. None of our people got sick petitioning, thankfully. But we were also assuring ourselves of that and assuring the voting public. So we did it. And I think we're going to have...
You're doing it.
But what's the purpose? I mean, people go, well, you're not going to win with 13 states, right? But more importantly, we're not going to win in a game that's locked up by the capitalists. And there are other parties that get on, like the Greens are on in almost 50 states. But even they can't be on the debate. As a vast presence as they have, they're denied access. You see someone like Bernie Sanders, who's a senator from Vermont for 30 years plus. He got tons of donations, small donations, but he was right up there. He had more than Biden. He was winning primaries. But the Democrats joined together to crush him. Why do they crush him? He's an establishment politician. But he was talking about things like Medicare for all, cancel student debt, help the people, support real equality. And these are dangerous prospects for Democrat and Republican. The Republicans obviously didn't want him, but the Democrats, more than anyone, decided, no. They would rather have had Trump win than Sanders have the possibility of winning. And that was before the pandemic. Imagine if Sanders were the Democratic Party candidate right now. He would be battling Trump and demanding masks for all, income for all. I think he was proposing $2,000 a month for families, something like that, maybe 3,000, which we also are demanding. Imagine if he had been the Democratic Party candidate. So ballot access is an important fight, and proportional representation, making it easier for people to vote, to register on day of voting. That should be something. Having elections on Sunday, having debates open to all, really enforce the equal time federal law that said that if one candidate gets media access, the others should too. That has never been applied for us. Never.
Mm-hmm. You know, on the Sanders comment, you know, a friend of mine personally went to Dr. Ron Paul and asked him, like, do you feel the election was stolen from you? And he said, yes, absolutely. And I think many could argue the same for Sanders. It's another long conversation, but you know, Sanders is not the first one. Dr. Ron Paul, being a former Republican congressman, and Sanders, Democratic congressman, left, right. But you know what brings them together, and also even Dennis Kucinich, former congressman out in Ohio, which I was clearly gerrymandered out. The people wanted him, and he was wrongfully gerrymandered out. And, you know, you have Jesse Ventura as well, Reform Party. These men, different viewpoints vastly, but they speak their truth. No one owns them, you know, no money. There's no following the money to these guys. They are outsiders that got elected by the people. So I do foresee the followings of these groups and many more coming together for an idea, again, to unite our country. So I am with you on the Sanders thing. I guess, Gloria, you know, I'm taking the emotion away from our current president, Trump, but I always like to focus on the positive. And I always say two good things with Trump getting elected is people are more engaged and involved than ever. And truly, he's an outsider. He is an outsider, at least when he was elected, more of an outsider. It's kind of shifted a little bit, but it was interesting to see somebody that a two-party system really didn't want to get elected, actually was able to pull it off. So I think, you know, an independent candidates and minded, I see you, whether you're with the party or not, Gloria, I see you as an individual personally. I see you for your viewpoints, and gosh, as long as they're peaceful, we welcome any and all viewpoints completely across the spectrum. You know, free and equal elections. So I love learning from you, and thank you for broadening my horizon. And I'm would love to be on the phone with you regularly in the future, so I can dive even more and develop that friendship. Really, it's been a journey you've been on with us longer than most presidential candidates.
Well, Christina, I want to say I really admire the work you've done. You've done it with such tenacity, and you and your people. You know, I've met them. I've seen them. They put up the whole professional setup for the debates, and they travel around the country to bring these ideas of access. I think it's very, very important, and more people are going to hear your message.
Oh, well.
Yep. But I want to say one thing, though, about the election.
Thank you.
Why do we run when we don't have a chance? We're running, actually.
That's how you build a chance, Gloria, over time. Just keep doing it over and over. You're carrying a baton, and you're going to pass that on. I am too. Put this platform on a decentralized platform with free and equal, but like you're carrying a baton and planting seeds, whether it's in this, I don't know. It's like, you can say that, but I am not in the mindset of not winning. This is how you win. You don't give up.
I would say this, though, is that we're running to help build for a new society, a new system. One where profits is not the motive, the driving force of the economy, but one based on need. Capitalism is a system where, especially in the US, the more housing that is built, the more homelessness there is. The more food is produced, the more hunger there is. That we have Tens of millions of empty homes, brand new condos, whole tracts of houses being built for profit. No construction company will build unless they make a profit. Of course, now their profits are in danger. Uh, but why should people have to pay $500,000, $1 million in San Francisco, 200,000, whatever it costs? Why should people have to go into debt for 30 years to assure that they will not be evicted? And then when you lose your job, you lose your home. Why should you be subject to a landlord's whim? I live in San Francisco, the highest cost in the country, and thousands of people in the street. But that's true of every city. Housing should be a right. And I propose that everyone should have a home regardless of ability to pay. Because who built those homes was the construction workers. It's a great skill. And homes are built collectively by dozens of people, skyscrapers, hundreds, if not thousands of workers, including building the material for those homes and buildings requires thousands of people in production. Food production requires thousands of people, from planting to harvesting to transport to retail. Everything requires the social production of thousands, tens of thousands of workers. But the ownership is private. You have Jeff Bezos owning the biggest companies in the world. This one man, multi-billionaire, he's a trillionaire really. He holds sway over hundreds of thousands of workers. Why should he have that power? That's the real dictatorship we live under. And so we're calling for socialism. The elections are a vehicle to create these ideas and give people empowerment. So I thank you so much. If people want to know more about us, they can visit my website, lariva2020.org, and learn about our new vice presidential candidate, Sunil Freeman, wonderful man, disabled rights activist who lives in Maryland and who I'm proud to be running with. He's an anti-war activist, he's an author, and we'll be spreading our message. Thank you, Christina.
Gloria La Riva 2020.com. Some quick questions. Thank you so much. Quick question, Gloria, from Jim Beckland. Any chance you can get on the ballot in Michigan?
Write-in. We're going to have write-in. We'll be on, I would say 13 states, and we're going to be write-in in at least 20. We're working on doing more.
Okay.
And people really can vote for us. In many of those states, most of the ones that we will do, they count the votes. They add up. The vote is not only a protest vote, it's a vote for what you believe in. And we need that vote more than ever.
Yeah, vote your conscience, really. Like, what's the point then? Like, vote your conscience or don't vote. I wouldn't vote for the lesser of anything that has to do with not good.
And I think the most powerful vote has been in the streets against racism and police brutality.
Another topic. We can dive into that. Nathan Hetzel, you should get 50 state ballot access due to COVID. Why should you be denied ballot access due to the epidemic? It is a travesty in our country. I thought the U.S. provided opportunities for all. Why haven't you sued? It's a lot of energy to sue up against a flawed system.
Yeah.
Just some thoughts. You can respond. Doris, thank you. I like your mug. Makes me want coffee. This was made by my teacher from college, Sister Margaret Muir. She, beautiful ceramic. This was college. I've had it for a decade or two now. I know, it's so special. We need to do something about those term limits. Way too long. Totally agree with you on that. Love Ron Paul, brought him up. Can we get Jo Jorgensen on the show? We've invited her. She said yes. I hope she comes. Message her. More people we have. Can we have Richard Winger, Ballot Access News? Good idea. Personal friend. I'm going to bring him on.
Love Richard Winger. Oh, God. For those who don't know who he is, he's a treasurer. He's a treasurer for all the people because he has fought for decades to help parties get on the ballot. He's a genius.
Yes, he's a personal friend. I call him a hero. He is so humble. He is the top election law expert in the United States. He's testified, years ago, it was over 350 cases. It's probably 400 or 500 now to better our ballot access laws throughout the U.S. So I've stayed at his home quite a few times in San Francisco. He's hosted me. So I'll be sure to have him on. Thank you for that. So And somebody's saying, no, they don't agree with socialism, Caleb, but I do support people like Gloria that are peaceful at getting their message across. I love that. That's what it's all about. So yeah, those are some things. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments. Gloria, as we get to the last 10 minutes of our call, I wanted to talk a little bit and have you just dive into the international situation and the economic crisis with the evictions looming. You've kind of touched a bit on that. Utility shutoffs, unemployment running out. So I just wanted to, I know that's a topic passionate of yours. So.
It's all coming together that people on July 25th lost the extra $600 a week that was provided in the unemployment and the pandemic unemployment assistance, which was for people who were contractors or informally employed, due also to the 12 million people in different states where the moratoria on evictions has now lifted. Now people can be evicted in those places. Even though there was a moratorium, the debt was increasing, and so they're all being at risk of being evicted. My party, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, is joining with many other people to continue the caravans that we've had during the pandemic to order the cancellation of the rents and mortgages, including for small business. Small business employs millions of people, and they're all shutting down, many permanently. It's a disaster for the economy. But the cancellation of rents is very important because if we come out of this pandemic, which could last months, years, where people's right to housing does not become the priority over profits for the landlords, and including also for small landlords who will also lose their housing. If the landlord loses his housing, we also get evicted. And who comes out ahead is the banks and the large real estate developers, who will become these monopoly conglomerates that can hold sway over every individual who needs housing, whether you're buying or renting. This is so serious for us to consider. That every structure people are living in, including all the empty ones that people should be housing, the homeless, if they stop paying rent, the buildings aren't going to fall. Now, the banks, which have been accumulating trillions of dollars, they should be the ones to pay now. If we don't come out of the crisis with the right to housing, millions could be homeless. Now, the unemployment insurance, I know many people, including my young nephews, nieces, people who have jobs that don't pay enough. Even $15 an hour isn't enough in many states. And to talk to them, that they get $600 an extra up to now, they're saying, I can pay my bills now. I'm getting rid of my debt. It shows you that the wages are too low in this country and that $600 extra should be permanent. People go, well, how are you going to pay for all this? Well, first of all, tax all those big corporations, the Fortune 500, who don't pay any taxes, who get tax rebates, who have tax shelters in the Caribbean and elsewhere, hiding their profits. Look at the Sackler family that invented the OxyContin, which has helped lead to the deaths of more than 400,000 Americans due to addiction. OxyContin and the Sackler family and other producers of opioids, which pumped over 1 billion pills into small towns throughout the country, poured these pills to lead to addiction. What are they doing with their billions? They're hiding them in tax shelters so that they're not liable to pay to the families who have been devastated by addiction. This is called capitalism, and why it is that I and so many more people are socialists, and why so many young people are becoming socialists. You asked about international. It's interesting that there's no money for hospitals and healthcare here at home, but there's money to blockade Cuba and money to try to overthrow the government of Venezuela, which also has a low incidence of the virus. I've been to Venezuela many times, and no, people are not crawling through the streets starving. What they are suffering is a U.S. blockade that's keeping food from coming into the country. The U.S. is deliberately stopping the ships coming to bring food, and they're stopping all the ships that were delivering oil for the fuel that is needed for energy in Cuba. Cuba provides more than 20,000 doctors for free healthcare in Venezuela, and in exchange, Venezuela sends oil for Cuba's energy needs. The U.S. is in the middle of those two countries, blocking those shipments. That is an act of war, and most people don't even know about it.
Wow.
The media doesn't let us know what's going on.
Do you find, like, I mean, with our current president, what are your feelings? I mean, you talked a little bit about, I mean, Obama and Clinton and Bush, and I just kind of am like, gosh, people have so much frustration over the current administration, but I guess, I have to go back to when I first got involved in the political realm, really was back in 98 when I was 17. I'm 39 now. And it just, I was more emotional. How can I see my dad get knocked off the ballot? Why are signatures 25,000 in Illinois versus 5,000 for D's and R's? And I just saw the flaws and the rigged and the corruption within the system. So, and being involved in this for 20 years, I've learned through the cycles of presidents before Trump that I don't know if I'm numb to it or I'm used to it. I don't think it's used to it. Like, I'm just like, let's change it. Let's not have any anger towards the past and now. Let's focus on the solution. Let's go in like a peaceful, positive, solution-based, bring in music, make it fun, and bring all the ideas and conversations together. That'll bring about solutions. I think John Lennon is super right on watching the wheels go round and round song. There are no problems, only solutions. So I guess, it's like, do you feel like, I mean, if you just read from Trump and look at previous presidents, do you feel similar towards the previous administrations, even beyond Obama, into Bush, Clinton, and so on? Just the whole system.
Well, it used to be that the millionaire corporate owners would, line the pockets of the politicians to make sure that they would get elected and back their policies and fill the halls of Congress with the lobbyists to pass laws that benefit corporate profits. But now the billionaires are actually running for office themselves. You have Trump, supposedly a billionaire, who knows, but he's quite wealthy. He runs, he wins. You have a billionaire like Bloomberg, he becomes mayor. These politicians are now the corporate owners. So it's like a merging of politics and the owners themselves. But it's just really taken the mask of what has always been the process of an electoral system and a political system that backs the profits over the rights of the people. Why is it, for example, that the sheriff's duty in any county in the country is to evict people instead of protecting tenants? The landlord has the rights over the tenant, no matter what. Reforms can take place. We fight for reforms. We want reforms to harness and to stop police brutality. I think the police should be disarmed. Why are they walking around with guns to shoot people? Black, Latino, Native, and white people. I don't know if people know, but half the people murdered have been white people. Sadly, there's been no rebellion against that among families of victims. But disproportionately, Black people are murdered, Native, Latino. We call it the war on Black America, and we say stop the war on Black America. Not just the Jim Crow, the apartheid system that existed until well into the deep 60s, but the crisis today of the lack of jobs, the highest rate of death among African Americans due to COVID, and poverty. There's a lot to fix. And I think that this uprising, the mass uprising on the question of police brutality, is awakening the whole population. Notwithstanding some of these fascist elements that have been promoted and supported by Trump. I mean, he's telling them literally, I'm on your side. But I think the vast majority of people want equality. And I think they're seeing that there is deep inequality. And because of this horrific assassination of George Floyd, And the other killings that have taken place, Breonna Taylor in Kentucky and others, 6,500 people who've been murdered by the police since Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson. 6 years ago, the anniversary in 4 days will be the anniversary that he was killed. And 6,500 Americans have been murdered. How can that be? So I think that the people are coming together, Christina. I think that people are realizing they're all in the same boat. We all need economic stability. We all need the right to life and health. We need the right to social peace, culture. We need the right to live. And the people of the world need the right to live. If we say we don't want the police to have these weapons of war, the tanks, the militarization, the rubber bullets, and by the way, I've been shot by a rubber bullet peacefully protesting in Ferguson.
Oh, wow.
If we don't want weapons of war at home, why should they be used abroad? Why should the Palestinian people continue to suffer from U.S. foreign policy that backs Israel to the hilt? Not because they care about Jewish people, but because they care to have this watchdog apartheid regime of Israel backing U.S. control of the Middle East for the oil. That's really the role of Israel. And that country couldn't survive as an apartheid state if it weren't for the $4 billion that the U.S. gives in grants to Israel.
Wow.
And why Trump's moving of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem is a sign of the U.S. intending to hold on to its empire there, in Africa, Latin America, everywhere. And I want to say, too, that the Democrats have often been the party, not just the Republicans, but been the party of war under Johnson. And that right now, even Biden is talking about renewed aggression, new aggression, increased aggression against China. And we reject that. China is not the enemy. Really, no country is the enemy. I think the enemy is the Pentagon and the war makers. We need peace in the world. And it starts here.
It does. Starts in here. It's I thank you for, I think we're about to wrap up. As far as multi-billionaire whatever presidential candidates, I guess you could argue Obama with his, under the table corporate funding, and the Clinton Foundation, and so on. I mean, there's these people in office, Newsom and Pelosi and Feinstein. I mean, where's all this money that you're getting coming from? We have a pretty clear idea, and these just aren't the individuals that are serving, I feel, the people. And that's across the political spectrum, D's and R's alike. It's based on the individual. I've got to bring up Leonard Peltier one more time. I do foresee an idea, a movement rising and electing an individual in the future, whoever he, she, age, race, it's irrelevant. It's about the heart, the mind, the compassion, what they stand for, and really a system of Congress that will pardon individuals, like hopefully in time, and
Yes.
and for many others, definitely in time, and hopefully Assange as well. And I've learned a lot about Ross Ulbricht as well. If you don't know about him, I can send you some link, and I think it would be great for you to connect with
Sure.
his mom, Lynn, and for Lynn to connect with Leonard through Ross, another one to be pardoned, sentenced to life without parole at 25 years of age. Like, it's just really not okay. And I watched on one of your videos and interviews, I loved what you said, that we need big, bold change in the way things are organized. And I couldn't agree with you more, Gloria. Those are your words I wrote down just researching on other interviews, and that we need a political revolution, you said. And I couldn't agree with you more. And I say, let's drop that R and go right into evolution. We can see this oil, gas. It's just, we're living in the dark ages. The system is
Oh.
intentionally suppressed technology. It is blatantly clear. We could and will one day, of the words of Tesla, have free energy. He set the ball for us, and we will see beautiful things rise in the future. Darius wrote, nailed it with the Israel-Palestine, the military-industrial complex. Just a note to you, Gloria, I agree. And I've learned a lot from Abby Martin of Empire Files and many more about
Marvelous.
Cynthia McKinney freeing Gaza and the Palestinian people. Definitely want to dive more into Venezuela and Israel and learn more. I'm in it for the long haul. So on that note, did you have any the hour flew by with you more than most. And did you have any final words for the people, a website you wanted to plug, how they can support? How do we get on the ballot in Michigan? People can gather signatures for you. Where do they go to support you?
I think the time is too late now. The days are wrapping up now.
That happens.
For ballot access, but we will do the write-in. And I thank you so much. You can write to us at lariva2020.org. And you can also look up for a lot of up-to-date information about the mobilizing efforts going on around the country for justice, not inside and outside the election, at liberationnews.org. That's 2 N's in the middle. liberationnews.org. And you can write me, and I'll be glad to answer questions or plug you in. We have a lot of volunteers. We want to get our presence all over the country. Think about this. When I'm petitioning, people go, but it's too late. You can't run. And it's like, that's what people are telling us. You can't run. It's too late already. I go, no, this is a period 3 months before the election that third parties can petition. They can do it earlier, but the Democrats and Republicans have been running for 2 years. Everyone knows who they all are for 2 full years. That's like the new election cycle. And we are at a great disadvantage. But we also have this. Our ideas really resonate among the people. I thank you so much again, Christina.
Oh, thank you, Gloria. And Jessica will be in touch about the details of our United We Stand tour this fall. I invite you to speak, be a part of that tour. We kick off in California, then New Mexico, and we're ending in Colorado. We're going to do 3 stops this year. Ooh. And we're planning to have our presidential debate in Colorado. I think that's where the energy is going to be. So we'll be in touch, and maybe we'll have 1 or 2. I'm not sure. We'll just see how the support, how it rolls. I'm open to anything. So thank you, Gloria. Much love, and we'll be in touch with more details, and you can call me anytime. All right.
And my feelings to all the people who've lost loved ones in this crisis.
Yes.
Thank you.
And for any reason, my feelings with you as well. Much love to our nation and our people and our world, to you out there.
Thank you.
Lots of love.
Bye.
Thank you for what you do, Gloria. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Hey, what's the matter with you, baby?